Can you tell I'm in denial?
You can't stay at the top forever.
I was also very surprised when I looked at my phone and saw Joe Girardi dismissed.
Well, I think mine were with common sense.
I think now belongs in the all-time greats top 10.
Boston, I really think only got to this point because of a guy named Chris Middleton being out for the Bucks.
That power play just was unbearable. It was humming.
Man, am I happy. I knew that this was going to happen. I knew he was going to come back.
When I think of New York Yankees now, is Judge. Probably people in the past when Jeter was coming up.
I would be shocked. A little bit hurt.
Hey, this is Greg Tepper of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, TexasFootball.com, and Valley Sports Southwest. You are listening to Outsiders Opinions with Kevin and Austin.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to our NFL Fantasy Opinions of the Week. The football season, of course, is almost here, but fantasy drafts are happening. I have one later this week. And Austin, I've kind of... There is like the no running back strategy, but I don't really do... I tried doing it, but I think you just have to think about positional value where you get drafted. I think taking a running back in the first round helps. It just, you got to make sure you don't get an injury. A guy gets an injury because there's such a high, like if you get Christian McCaffrey, he could be your best player, but he also you could be missing a spot there.
Yeah, I think before we even talk about strategy, it depends on what league you're in. Are you in a PPR league, a half PPR league, or a standard league? I think standard leagues obviously sway towards taking running backs because PPR is not a thing. I think that half PPR is by far the best format. I think it's the fairest format. I think it accurately depicts the value that a player adds during a game in a way that I think PPR way overrates receiving and standard makes it to where, well, receptions don't matter at all. And I don't think either of those are right. I think half PPR is the way to go. 4-point passing touchdown leagues with 6 rushing and receiving and other ways of fumble recovery touchdowns all should be 6. But yeah, do you have any strategies at all going into a draft? Do you like to? I'll give you a couple examples. Do you like to take a tight end high or wait for tight end? Do you like to punt a certain position? Do you like to wait to draft a QB or draft a QB high? Do you like to stack, meaning that you get multiple players on one team, or do you like to layer players from every team on your team? Well, what are your thoughts going into a draft? What do you really prioritize?
So to me, I prioritize wide receiver and getting the best wide receiver. Tight end, I do kind of look for the best tight end. I don't want to bargain shop with the tight end. I think you can bargain with a quarterback, especially in PPR leagues. And just because the quarterback, unless he throws for a bunch of touchdowns, you have to get yardage. But if you have a bunch of wide receivers, that can get you more points than quarterback. Quarterback's not really going to save you. And that I like to bargain with running backs.
So you like to bargain with running backs and QB?
Yep.
What are your thoughts on kickers and defense? Do you use kickers and defense, or?
I think one of my leagues doesn't have a defense. It's just kicker. They got rid of defense. Counted. So that's kind of been thing. I am interested. I might draft Brendan Aubrey high because of what I know he was huge in fantasy last year. And I don't think that's going to change with the Cowboys offense struggling. But I think you can waiver wire a kicker. Like you just go by the week.
I think that's true. I don't really like having kickers or defense in mind. Now you can have them, it's fine. But I do wonder where some of those guys are going to go. Like Aubrey. I mean, we saw Cam Little kick a 70-yarder in the preseason. How does that affect his draft stock? I'm a zero RB guy in a lot of cases, but you can't get... I think a big mistake that people make is they draft their team before the draft. And so they're like, I have to get this guy. But when a guy who falls, and you can really get a lot of value for that player at their pick, like if the guy falls really far, just make the best pick. Don't necessarily you don't have to go with this specific player at this specific pick. You don't even have to go to a specific position. I mean, if there's a wide open like disparity between the top wide receiver and top running back at this spot, then you should take the best available. I have been notorious for punting RB though. That's kind of been my thing, and I usually still finish really high. You just have to do it the right way. Like last year on my main team, I punted RB hard, and I was starting James Conner and J.K. Dobbins basically week 1. And I mean, if you remember that they didn't go all that high, neither of them, but they both finished extremely well before obviously J.K. Dobbins got hurt for the playoffs. But I think that punting RBs can be useful, but it's an extremely risky strategy because if you don't get an RB to produce, you're going to lose every week.
Yeah, and yeah, with punting RBs, you have to kind of know a lot about what, like, hidden running backs. Like, you don't have to draft Saquon, but James Conner was a good running back. J.K. Dobbins was good last year.
Yeah, and I also had Tony Pollard, so those 3 were my RBs last year.
So I don't like to go super high because I think wide receiver gives me more value for how high. It may not be a higher ceiling, but my first pick is wide receiver. But unless like Saquon falls to me at like 8 or another pick, then I do think you have to adjust, which is why I'm not like huge into, I need to draft. I need to do so many practice drafts. I just think, to me, I got to be prepared. I like to look for sleepers, like who can I draft in the later round. But also I might draft high. I think one strategy thinking about running back, because it really is an important position to fantasy, is thinking about the Chargers and Omari and Hampton with them.
Yeah, Hampton's a guy who's getting a lot of talk recently, especially in fantasy circles, because of what J.K. Dobbins produced last year and also Najee Harris. Still, we don't know whether or not he's going to be on the physically unable to perform list to start the season. And that would be huge news either way. I do think that the ability for a running back to get as many touches as possible is obviously valuable, but also the team they are on has to be at least decent offensively. You can't pick an RB on a really bad offense and expect them to perform in most cases. I think people sometimes confuse it because I heard a guy talking yesterday about fantasy football. I was like, don't draft RBs on bad teams. That's not necessarily true. I don't think you need to not draft RBs on bad teams. You need to avoid drafting RBs on bad offense. If they're on a good offense but the team is bad, that's okay. That's fine because they're still going to get a lot of production. The offense is going to score enough points to where maybe they get more possessions because of how bad their defense is. And maybe they go 7-10, 6-11, but because their offense is good, they'll at least be competitive in those games and have the ability to perform. Like for example, I think the Cowboys are a good example of that. If you can find out who the Cowboys starter is going to be for the majority of the season at running back, I think that position holds a lot of value. Whether or not you think the Cowboys are going to win 7 games this year is besides my point, because I think their offense is going to be extremely good as long as Dak stays healthy. With Dak, CD, George Pickens, Jake Ferguson, and everyone else. If it's going to be Javonte Williams, if it's going to be Jaden Blue, if it's going to be Phil Maffa, if it's going to be anyone, Deuce Vaughn, Miles Sanders, whatever happens, if you find out who the top running back is going to be for a large part of the season, I think that position holds immense value because of how many players are going to score touchdowns for Dallas this year. And so if you can get their top RB touchdown getter, that would be extremely valuable. So I think not necessarily looking at what teams are going to be bad, don't draft RB, but looking at what offenses are going to be bad. Because even if their offense, even if they're a good team, right, and they're just a defensive heavy team, it does not necessarily mean that the running back is going to be good, right? So I think that, again, that's why I kind of went with the guys that I went with last year, is because I know how Harbaugh likes to use running backs. So I trusted J.K. Dobbins. Also trusted J.K. Dobbins with his talent. Same thing with Tony Pollard last year in Tennessee. Tennessee was another not good team, and they didn't even have a great offense, but their entire offense was Tony Pollard, basically. So in cases like that, you can avoid the norm of picking running backs on good teams.
Yeah, I agree. And I like to think who is an offense that's going to run the ball, and that's why I would choose, if you can find the Cowboys running back, choose them, because Shoddy is saying he's going to run the ball more. So that would be a reason. And then kind of what are you looking for when you're choosing a wide receiver? A lot of yards or touchdowns?
I think it's a balanced approach. I think it's consistent target share, meaning the amount of passes he gets per game. Also, high passing volume offenses. And this kind of goes into my QB. I like drafting a QB that's going to give me a lot of points because I do think there's value there. Now, you'll say, well, didn't you draft Jaden Daniels last year? Yes. And that's because that shows how much I believed in Jaden Daniels being a point scorer. In my main leagues, I had him on both of my teams because I thought that he was that good, and I thought the Commanders' offense was going to be talented with him running the ball as well. But with wide receivers, I don't like taking guys like Terry McLaurin because he scored a lot. 30% of his fantasy points last year in half PPR leagues was off of touchdowns. And that is concerningly high, especially in an offense where there's going to be guys that take away those touchdowns, whether it's Debo or Jacory or Bill Krosky-Merritt, also Jaden Daniels with his legs. I don't think you can rely on touchdowns too much in certain wide receiver cases. Guys like Mike Evans, who are always around the same amount, you can sort of rely on it. Yes, he's been down to like 7, but it usually does not. It usually is between like 8 and 12 every year. I think last year he had 13, but that's besides the point. I think that receiving yards are something that can be very misleading if they get no receptions. For example, if it's a guy that's a high air yardage guy, meaning that all of his yards are down the field, he may have half the receptions of another guy who's getting 1,000 yards. And that's where I look at tight end. Tight end is a position where I want a QB that's going to throw the ball to the tight end. Because if the tight end gets 5 receptions for 50 yards, that's so much better than a wide receiver getting 2 receptions for 100 yards. Because the 2 receptions for 100 yards is not sustainable. It's just not a sustainable measure to say that the wide receiver is going to be a 100-yard receiver, even a 70-yard receiver. But 5 receptions for 50 shows that the trust between the QB and the tight end is there, and they're going to score touchdowns because tight ends are very good in the red zone in general for most tight ends. Maybe not the Kelseys of the world, but most tight ends that are bigger in size and can box out linebackers / safety / corners or whoever's on them in the zone can put up touchdowns. So young QBs usually like tight ends in most circumstances. Also, running quarterbacks do not throw the ball to running backs. So if you're Jalen Hurts, he doesn't throw the ball many times to a running back because he can just run the ball. Same thing with Lamar. I think Justice Hill would be a fine receiving back in most cases, but in the case that he is, even with if Derrick Henry wasn't there, still, Lamar's not going to throw the ball to Justice Hill. Jane Daniels isn't going to throw the ball very much to Austin Eckler. These running quarterbacks do not throw the ball. They don't check down, which is why I'm worried about Breece Hall. Breece Hall has had a lot of receiving upside in his past, but now that Justin Fields is there, I put strong doubts regarding his ability to perform in a half PPR format receiving the ball. And with how good their offense is, that will determine how many touchdowns he can get. But I do worry about his reception share because they're not going to be throwing the ball to running backs as much unless it's a designed screen. And there's not going to be too many of those during the game.
Yeah, and I'm skeptical of Breece Hall because you also have I can't remember his name last year. The rookie
Braylon Allen.
Braylon Allen. He's someone that I think has kind of made it a dual backfield, and he was good last year. Wasn't consistent, but had some good moments. He's someone that I'm interested in. And then I'm thinking about quarterback. I'm curious where Caleb Williams goes with Ben Johnson and how. I would say Caleb Williams has more upside than Jared Goff, but Jared Goff I know was a good quarterback in fantasy last year.
What are your thoughts about stacking?
Stacking
is having a QB and wide receiver, QB running back on the same team, having multiple players on the same team on your own.
I'm scared of doing that because It's just putting a lot in. You're putting a lot into that team doing well and that duo doing well. I would rather have different. I would like to diversify. So if I'm wrong about, let's say, the Cowboys offense, you draft CD and Dak, and Dak doesn't, and that offense doesn't play well, then you're losing out. You're not playing well at quarterback.
Here's my argument against it, against what you're saying. You only have to be right. So if let's say you have 8 players on your team, you have a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex, or in a tight end. So that's 8. So you have 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a QB, and a flex. And let's say you have 3 players from the same team: a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver. You only have to be right about that team playing well that game once. It's not a 50-50 chance, but if the offense plays well, probably all 3 of those players are going to play well. Probably. And you're right. If they don't play well, it's really hard to win the week. So that's why you got to choose a stack with a good offense. But in your case, you have to be right 8 different times. You have to be like, this player's going to play well against this matchup, and this matchup, and this matchup, and this matchup. And all those times are separate events. 8 separate events. While the other one, you're getting 3 out of the way in 1. Where if you're right, now the other 5 have less negative impact if they play well. Or if they play bad. But in the other case, you cannot guarantee a certain amount of players are going to make up for the missteps. Because if you're on a team again with 8 players and a couple of those players play poorly, it's the same amount as having a stack. But it doesn't have the upside of a stack. Meaning that the stack is where the QB and all of them get their value at the same time. That they create each other's value. So I like to stack in a lot of cases. Now, I don't think you should overstack, and I think overstacking could be a big problem that people run into whenever they hear stacking. But I think 3 is a fine amount to have on one team. You don't have to start all those guys on the same team, but it doesn't guarantee, like if the QB and wide receiver do well, it doesn't mean the running back's going to do well because maybe they don't run the ball that much. But I think stacking is a useful convention, especially and really only if you're going for stacks between good players that are all on a good offense.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's.
Like, I think that this one is not possible. It's not. But if you went and Goff, Amon-Ra, and Jahmyr Gibbs, now there is no way you could get that team. But if you did, I think that's a good stack because they are probably all going to play well. I think a good stack right now that's a little bit on the smaller end for this season is the one that is that's with the Bears. I think the Bears, and it wouldn't be with a running back. It would be with Caleb Williams, Colston Loveland, and then choose your wide receiver between either Rome Odunze or DJ Moore. Because I think if the offense plays well, it's going to be through those guys. And I do think their running back situation is not the best right now.
That you make a good argument with like wide to upside and stacking, and it could work. Like you could probably try stacking maybe the Bengals with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Well, but that probably be hard. Then maybe Chase Brown, but you make a good argument. I'm just more like there are different probabilities, and I feel safer with just having one guy. Then you don't have to figure out bye weeks and all that.
That's true. That's a good point. Bye weeks are definitely a problem. Bye weeks are something that everyone should pay attention to. I do think they're more important in like a BBM format, which is like best ball, which is like on Underdog or DraftKings or Drafters or any of those, than it is because on the other one, because you can afford to lose a week, right? If you just decide you don't have to care about bye weeks if your team is really good because you're going to make the playoffs anyway. But in a situation to where the points add up over the season, that can definitely be an important thing to take into consideration.
Yeah. So how many fantasy teams are you running this year?
You talk about redraft leagues?
Yeah, redraft leagues.
Right now it's just one, but it'll probably be 2.
Okay. I just have one redraft league. My The only other one I do is Dynasty, which I'm a huge fan of Dynasty.
You are a huge fan?
I'm enjoying it. I like being able to like build a team and see how it is. I didn't have a good year, but I got number 1 overall pick, and my weakness was running backs, and so I got Ashton Genty. I paired him with Tony Pollard and Aaron Jones. So I like the idea of like, okay, I get these players. Okay, I can do that again. And you can find positions of weakness and like where do you need to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never done a Dynasty League, but I would definitely be interested. I think that's a fun concept.
Yeah.
However,
You
the
have to
problem I
find a
have
group.
with Dynasty Leagues is that
Yeah.
anyone leaves the league, it's
Yeah.
kind of like completely blown up because I don't know how you can continue it.
You gotta find a guy and go like, hey, this is your team. I think I did that with a keeper because the redraft league tried to do a keeper league. And it was just like, no. And then they decided to do a dynasty. Keeper was weird because like someone left. And they had to
Yeah,
figure
I
it
don't
out.
like keepers. I think you should either do Dynasty or do redraft.
Yeah. So, all right. But yeah, I think that's all I got. I'll let you close this one out.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. Please let us know what you guys think about the fantasy football season, the players you like, the players you don't like, and please catch us in our next video.